Good morning, everyone. Nice occasion to be together with all the people in the industry and fellow experts on the topic. Um, since it's a small panel, we'll try to keep it more interactive. We'll also encourage questions from your side. Also, it's not just something that we three should be talking. Hope it's okay with you. In terms of cyber crime, if you see, it's not something which is geography bound. Right? So attacks start from anywhere, end up anywhere. An attack party can be anywhere. So if you look at so many ransomware incidents or malware incidents, which start from geographies which we have not even heard of. Then even within the country, if you look at, there are Jamtara kind of incidents. These are not something which is specific to one geography, and you cannot bind them into one place as well. And that's something that all of us face, right? So we'll start with questions on how this whole collaboration can happen across geographies, or how is it happening today in your views? And we'll take it from there.
I would like to stress is as said by Vijaykumar. Yeah, the collaboration is very much required because the threat is universal, and so the defense should also be universal. That should be the basic principle. So if you see the Russia-Ukraine issue, or the Palestine-Israel issue, whatever the cyber threats happening, it's propagating, and the loss, the amount which we lost because of the cyber crime, that's also tremendous. The R&D effects, which constitute like building the firewalls, the WAFs, and the antivirus solution, that is also a bigger amount. It's in millions or billions, which a small country or organization can afford. That is the most critical part. Like the defense mechanism cannot be a standalone thing, because the other end, the cyber hackers or the criminals behind the scene, they are united. I was reading in one of the journals that when a ransomware attack happens, they are posting it in the dark web, and it will take only micro minutes for the other hackers to take it forward and hack the complete systems in different countries and different environments. So they are connected. So the other side of the table, the defense professionals also need to be connected.
I think if from you, Sanket.
Yeah, I'll start this with a real incident that I came across with a particular fintech in India. So it's not an organization who does not invest or does not have a proactive approach towards security. But at certain times, you come across something which none of the solutions are being able to track it, right? We know about something as lookalike domains. So this particular organization had solutions which could talk about their brand monitoring, the attack surface, the external surface, right? But they suddenly got a call from one of their customers saying that I took a loan from your organization, but the money has not been remitted. And this particular person was in shock because that particular fintech is not into lending. They're into, like, basically they're a technology, it's a TSP, right? When they checked it, it exactly had identical assets, like the site, and the domain was kind of similar, but something which none of the algorithms which look at lookalike domains can find out. Now the problem is how to take it down. If it's internally in a nation, it's pretty easy that you talk with the service providers, authoritative servers, and take it down. But when we talk about cross-border and countries with which India has special relations, it becomes a lot of challenging. You try to take those down with different aspects. They launch a state-sponsored attack on the country. Now, there's a specific way to deal these things, which get to know when organizations follow certain steps of reporting it to CERT or reporting it to the regulators who come and help actually on those situations, right? Because they are also aware of the limitations of different solutions available. But organizations are afraid in doing that, thinking that they would penalize. So these are kind of stuffs which should be as a SOP that should be maintained in organizations, stating if something of this sort occurs, because the country that it was occurring, and it's still up, by the way, it hasn't gone down, it has been over 2 months. The only way to do is when the Ministry of Home Affairs comes into the play, right? Because it's a country with special relations that India has, special in quotes, who has spun it up, and there's no other way to bring it down. So taking few measures which are like not solution based, but taking help of the different regulators that are there can also help in this rather than just the solutions, because solutions will do, but every solution will have limitations.
Yeah, that's true. And unfortunately, the whole industry has become in a way that all these incidents are looked at only as a technical incident, whereas the business elements of that and other collaboration which is required within the organization, it is not emphasized much. It's I don't know who's to be blamed for that, but you also touched upon a very important topic of the reluctance in sharing that information with others, right? So we have it's sort of a hypocritical mindset in many places where you can see that I want to know what has happened in another place so I can prepare myself and I can protect my entity, but I will not disclose what has happened at my place. It's that typical kind of story where everybody thinks that if I drop one glass of water in a bucket of milk, nobody is going to find out. But unfortunately, most of the organizations have gone into that mindset. It's the same we can see even with artificial intelligence, right? So I don't want to share data, but I want the artificial intelligence to work perfectly and give me. Okay, so that's a mindset I think we need to come out of because unless we share, there's no way that the industry as such can be protected, and we are not working in an isolated environment, right? So we are all connected some way or the other through some organization or the other, and whenever regulators like certain ask for information within that 6 hours, we need to go beyond what is there in the text and think of why it is required. If one entity in a country is affected by a new type of attack or new threat actor, there's a high chance that it can spread to others as well. So something needs to be done. And so that's something that only an organization can, like certain or RBI or SEBI or any of these regulators can do. Okay, so keeping that in mind, so what do you think about what are the barriers in this collaboration from your own experience or what you see in the industry? I'll start with you, Sanket.
Sure. So I see the barriers from both ends, right? There are a couple of areas where there are not much clarity on what exactly is to be done. When we talk about an incident being reported within 6 hours, what exactly qualifies as an incident is a very subjective thing. There's no proper guideline on mentioning what exactly is to be termed as an incident. So take for example, and when certain or all this regulators talk about, they do not talk about cyber security as a perspective, it's about information security. My accounts data, someone else throwing that paper somewhere, which can lead to a financial loss, can also be something which is an incident. Or someone logging in from a cafe where a hack happened is also an incident. And a ransomware coming in is also an incident. If I have to report everything to certain would be filled with noise. So what exactly is to be reported is something that's subjective. Second is from when 6 hours. Because the example that I gave, that has been there for 1 month, which they didn't know. They came to know 1 month later, and they had to find something because they needed to investigate. So from which 1 to 6 hours? Next, once they inform what's the next steps, is something that they're worried about because there's no clarity on there, right? So both ends, like what is to be done, what not to be done, is a lot of cloud that's there, still there. So which kind of creates the barrier, I feel. So when I suggested them that you should report it, they would be able to help you. The question was, what if they take action against us? So these are the kind of things that creates the barrier, I believe. What I have observed and what I have experienced with people.
Yeah, I understand, and unfortunately, like what I was saying earlier as well, right? We are expecting too much in the initial stages of maturity, right? So, if you look at the whole banking or financial industry, this is there for 100 plus years and nothing new. So whenever a regulation comes in, it's something which is adding to something which was already there. Whereas when it comes to cyber related requirements, regulations, etc., it's something new. So the initial set of requirements, clarifications will always have more questions than answers. I think it's a journey we need to move towards. You cannot expect a kid which is just born to run a full marathon at a sprint pace, right? So our expectations also need to be aligned. And from whatever practical experience I have seen across the industry, I can at least say that when you do these reportings, it's not generally penalized unless the regulator has a inclination or from whatever data you submit, it comes to light that you have been completely negligent. If that is not the case, generally these are not penalized. Okay? It's just my observation. I'm not working for any of the regulators, so I cannot give this as a qualified response, but this is what I've been observing. And I think that's something that I want to share with everybody also, because you need to be much more confident in reporting that. And just to add to what you are saying, if in any incident you feel that you don't have adequate information at that time, you can just say that we have seen this, we are investigating further, we will keep you updated, rather than but you wouldn't report. So that's just one point of view. So anything from you?
This case, I would like to correlate to the Uber CISO issue, the like a civilian issue. What had actually literally happened is he was ready to report, but the management or the board had not supported him in the initial days. But later, when it come to the legal or the court basis, he was the only person who got victimized. So as the CISO of the organization, they have got some personal liability, but the ethical issues of the corporate, that also need to be investigated. But even if the person, the CISO wants to report or want to share the information, there are some ethical challenges which act as a barrier for him to share the information, which can be a two-sided sword. Again, many of the at least Indian organizations under the financial industry, they have the certain IDRBT and all the regulators in place who support the organization to come out of the scenario. But how long as an entity, the corporate supports this mission, that also need to be checked.
So you talked about some important organizations like IDRBT, right? Which is fortunately or unfortunately only for a limited set of organizations like banks. So how do you think this whole public-private partnership in all these things can evolve? What is your, say, a wish list of what should happen?
IDRBT is a great institution in that perspective, both from the training as well as incident management activities. Like those who are the part of the Indian banking system have been to IDRBT, and I will strongly recommend for that, because the courses, the curriculum and the CISO forum which they hold, it gives a complete holistic picture for the cyber defense personnels working in the stream. Another area, from my experience, I would like to cover is on one of the incident I have witnessed in one of the organization. We had a email system attack, and it was like a completely unethical one, where a vendor just hacked the system and showcased his expertise. So, and after that, the same incident was reported to Certain also. So the Certain helped us actually to come out of the situation. So they actually warned the particular vendor, and even went to an extent that they will try to blacklist the particular vendor from the Indian industry itself. So such an activity I'm not sure whether any other country or any other regulator will take it on hand. So at least in India, the regulators are well ahead and supporting the financial systems.
Yep. So, public-private partnership is something that in any field, right? If it's just not security, any other field. What I have observed is it only brings good things, right? Obviously, there are a couple of negative things, but in this particular aspect, the positive things comes in such an impact that the negative things become negligible. So just to give one example, since we get an opportunity with respect to the field that we are working with to collaborate or work on a couple of things with the regulators, the kind of engagement or the activity that they have with the banks or the fintechs. Recently, we saw that RBI had a meeting with all the fintechs, right? So just not security, but also with respect to other regulations as well. And security, if I talk about specific, this sharing of the challenges between both the public and the private sector players gives an understanding of what's going around. If I just take an example of a public sector bank, they do not have any challenges with respect to budgets. Their only constraint is their process, right? Wherein in smaller organizations, they face the reverse. Process is not the challenge because the ladders are lesser, but they have a budget constraint. But if you look at both the scenarios are same because for them, implementing it would take a lot of time. For them, they can implement faster. So this conversations actually gives them an understanding to both parties of how they are balancing out things so that they can come up with different measures to act proactively with respect to different threats that are there.
Yeah, and between that technology, budget, and process, there's one more element which is normally a big challenge is people.
Absolutely.
Like, again, with public sector banks or bigger entities, the number of resources is not a huge constraint. But when it comes to smaller organizations, that's always a problem. So, how do you think this whole industry can grow in terms of bringing in more nuanced resources who are well versed with cybersecurity and etc.?
That's a great, or the main challenge which we face on a day-to-day basis. To be open and realistic, I don't understand like how a 1-year-old analyst, after spending only like hardly 12 months, he's getting a job offer with a 200% increment and with a work from home facility and all the freedom to work. So the people are captured. I don't know whether that is the right word. People are just like all the big fours or the other bigger organization. They are capturing the talents that also not a mature talents. They are just capturing it from the financial sector or the industry and into the consulting space. So it's one of the greatest challenge. So we need to capture the good talent and we need to have a differentiating strategy so that they stick to the industry.
Okay, so before answering this question, there can be a lot of debate on this particular topic with AI being able to do a lot of stuff which analysts used to do, but I'll keep that part separate and talk about a personal experience, right? And this is very personal. My journey started as a hacker. I've worked with many law enforcement organizations as well as an hacker. But when I started off with this industry, there was one thing that I faced. When we do hacking, so take for example, I fire off my Kali Linux, I find out a vulnerability, I go and exploit it and get a enterprise session. But in industry, that's not going to happen. Even for the training institutes that are there across the country, you will find it very less who goes and gives that knowledge to people of how an enterprise security works. So all the training institutes who are doing a very tough job of catering that knowledge or like spreading the knowledge, needs to also look at things on showing them practical experiences as well. I'm having a VM setup where I fire up my Linux, I hack that, and I'm like, oh wow, it gives me joy. The industry, that won't actually happen because there would be different layers of defenses. I'll get stopped at the DMZ level itself. So giving them an understanding of how an enterprise architecture works is something that's really important when the initial phases start. I've seen a couple of colleges or institutes nowadays where they are focusing more on networking and how it actually works, right? So that kind of a thing, I guess, can change the workforce that we are looking into. And obviously, people will have to look at more on a analytical view of things, of correlating different solutions and getting insights from that, because rest of the things of looking at the logs and deriving something out of that would something that would be automated, and we're already seeing automations there and AI would come in there, right? So that particular aspect of people having an understanding of how would this actually work, right? So just gamifying this particular instance, supposingly I have two setups. One is a VMware, what I can do. I have another setups which has got different layers. I can actually understand to what level can I go if I go with that in the industry, right? So, and most people that we see nowadays come into the world of cybersecurity because they want to learn ethical hacking. They do not want to come in the world of cybersecurity because they're going to protect you. I can bet on this number. We go and meet 100 people. 80 would be like, I want to learn hacking. I want to do red teaming. I want to create a CV. They won't go and say, if there's a CV, I'm looking to make something that would protect it. Right? So that kind of a thing has to be imparted. And I guess that can change something.
Yeah, that's true. And yeah, the perception has become that hacking is everything, or just having the technical knowledge of how to do hacking can take you places, or you can become the CISO or whatever just by doing ethical hacking or learning how to do VAPT exercise. Unfortunately, that's far from the truth, because unless you have a business perspective in terms of how things work, etc., it's very difficult. And actually, if you look at the hackers have gone into a different mode in terms of understanding the whole picture compared to the ethical hackers. So if you look at, say, a Bangladesh Swift attack, you go into the nuance in terms of how they orchestrated the whole thing, in terms of how to get into that network, stay on, understand how things work, get the whole picture, design how to take money out and withdraw that money. It's such an amazing thing. Yeah, the other parallel that I can draw is, if you look at, you would have heard of the Cosmos Bank ATM incident in 2018, and there was a UCO Bank UPI incident sometime in 2023 November. If you deeply analyze both these, the modus operandi is almost the same. Just that in Cosmos Bank, it was the card switch. When it comes to UCO Bank, it is the UPI switch. In both the cases, the modus operandi is almost the same. The core banking will reject the transaction. The switch will say approved, and the money goes. So it is the same thing that has been done in both the places. It's a shame that after 5 years, the industry hasn't learned that one type of attack on one business area can be easily replicated in another. So you look at all the regulations that came in which mandated that you should do reconciliation, etc., etc. How many people really thought, okay, if this can happen in the card network or my ATM network, and what if that happens, say, in my UPI, or what if it happens, say, in my RTGS NEFT network, or if you take, say, in insurance or any other place, what about even bill payment, right? You send something, but like to make a payment, it doesn't happen, but the bills get approved and approved and approved. So who's going to look at these from a holistic picture? Unfortunately, the people in the cybersecurity world or even in organizations, they look at only the technical aspect. people consider that, okay, this is something technical, we cannot understand this. And the CISOs and their teams are very busy with all the vulnerabilities and what is not monitored, etc., etc. The complete picture is somewhere getting lost.
To your point, but vulnerability assessment or a CEH activity, it should be a part of the risk assessment exercise of the organization or a process like this ATM switch process or the authorization process. It should not be the only point where we should look into. The technical assessment as well as it should be the part of the organization risk management process centrally, and the risk as well as the impact need to be identified, just like the hackers. That's
True. So the awareness also needs to be built within the organizations, and we need more participation and collaboration within the organization, not just across organizations or across geographies, right? So that's something we need to start building in our own organizations. And we also need to build in more awareness in terms of what options are available. Like we talked about Certain. How many of you know that Certain publishes advisories almost on a daily basis? You need not go and subscribe to many things by paying. These are free resources which are available. So Certain does not say something just about receiving information. These information are available. You can connect your SIM through Styx, Taxi, whatever protocols that they are enabling. So it comes in free to you. They publish vulnerability advisories on a daily basis, which they keep churning out, saying that these are something that we have seen. You need to patch this, etc. So we need to, when we talked about public-private partnership and collaboration, there is an element for the private people also to understand what the government and others are providing and make use of that, because again, it's an ecosystem where each one has to contribute.
Cyber Switch Kendra, they monitor the applications, like a public-facing application from a threat monitoring perspective. They identify like the vulnerable ports, any new identified vulnerability which are not being patched, and they gives us a like notification. So those are some of the public initiatives which we have.
So in terms of if you slightly move from the collaboration into, say, a quantification, because that's another area which is constantly being discussed, and we had a good discussion just outside. So what is your view in terms of cyber risk quantification? How do people take it to the board and say, hey, if you don't fix this, this is the dollar value you are going to lose?
I would start that by borrowing a line from you, which I learned is, it's a baby that's born, it would take some time to run. Right. So having said that, when we talk about risk quantification, right, and I'll talk here on risk quantification on a very unbiased way. That why, the first thing is, why is it needed? Because everyone across the organization, they have different functions, right? Everyone would not understand the technicalities of security. So just taking the example of Uber, which was just being discussed, the organization management understood that there are a lot of cyber risks, but what can be the implications of it was not clear to them, right? Every organization at the end of the day has one motto, which is, how does their P&L look, right? If the organization business is not doing good, cybersecurity is going to go down the list of priorities, right? And people look at it as an overhead rather than a driver of business or a protector of the top line. So, first of all, organizations who have already invested a lot in security solutions, and the solutions are doing at best what they can, right? If I talk about an industry leader, XDR, it will have false positives. Obviously, every solution will have false positives, but it will try to do its best. But even having that, what are the threats that you can have? And what are the investments that you can do? Or areas where you can reduce investments to utilize that money to do something else is something that would make the board a lot more interested in those conversations. The question is, how do you do it? because it's too subjective. And it differs from organization to organization. And any particular model that's available in the market has not been innovated or worked upon for a long time. And there's a lot of manual intervention that's needed. So if we have to actually do risk quantification per se, we actually need to see what are the different controls that are there in the organizations. Now, when I talk about this, does it mean I go and click, do I have governance, risk and compliance tick? Do I have encryption in my cloud tick? No. Because I will always have a biasness. I have to level my maturity, take for example a global framework, NIST, CSF framework, and I have to level my maturity, I'll always be like, I'm 4 out of 5. I'm 3.2 out of 5. But is it actually? Fine, if I want, I can do that and actually connect my systems to see what's the level of maturity. And that's exactly the approach that needs to be taken, where the systems and the data starts talking rather than we being manually entering and talking about that. And the first and foremost reason to take this approach is because data is something that's coming from these devices won't lie to a certain extent, right? If I go and say data won't lie, would be something where I would remove the concept of hallucination of data, which still happens with many solutions. Right? So I guess that's something which can give a clearer picture to the management and make decisions faster. I'll give you analytics. On an average, organizations use 8 different solutions, but even then, only 1/3 of these incidents are identified by them. Right? So having this understanding of where are the things going, or what is the level of maturity, what's the coverage that I'm getting from using those solutions, is something that's going to help the management and the other business leaders in the organization understand of what's the implications of it. Because it's just not that organization. When an organization faces a particular incident, it's the industry who has a cascading or a domino effect that goes on. Right. So I think that's going to help the management understand. And every circular that we see or every regulation that we see, the first point is always the board needs to be aligned of what are the cybersecurity functions in the organization, right? So I guess that's how it's going to help.
The qualitative and the quantitative part, both are like in research, it is a debatable, like which is good and which is bad and what are the advantages, disadvantages. All these areas applies to this context also. But what I have seen from the industry is that the problem with us is that if we go for a pure play quantitative study, we are doing the monitoring activity. We are identifying a threat through our antivirus or a EDR solution. So we are blocking it, or we are preventing it. So the quantification will not be always like if the breach had happened, what is the exact loss? We will not be able to come up with the exact figures because the breach had not happened. So that may be one of the reasons which I think the QRS system is not getting feasible or getting implemented in our systems. The other part, if we go for a qualitative one, we can say that we have identified some 3-4 high critical vulnerabilities and we prevented it. So that maybe the board, the non-technical people or the cyber less aware people, make them more understand that there was a vulnerability which our SOC team or the information security team had prevented. So again, as everyone, like the research scientist says, it shall be a hybrid approach, maybe.
Thank you.